This happened to me while I lived in Korea right before I moved to America. I don't know if you have ever heard of Kishins. That's Korean for, well, I guess ghosts. They look like the Ring Girl, in all white, long black hair, and really pale faces. Oh yeah, and usually they are women. Just thought I'd let you know. Well, here's my experience. One night, while I was studying in my room, I felt very tired and couldn't continue studying. Thinking that some rest would help, I turned in for the night. My room had everything: a computer, TV, VCR back in the day, everything. But back to the story. I was so tired that I thought I'd fallen asleep the instant I crashed into bed. Oddly, I became very restless. I experienced some type of vertigo and felt a little sick to my stomach. Thinking that I had caught the flu or a bad cold, I turned off all the lights and the TV and tried to sleep. Lying there in the dark didn't help my sleep at all. I started feeling cold and scared for some reason. Then, from a distance, I heard a girl crying. I was chilled to the bone. I didn't want to move and my eyes were wide open. The crying continued for about 3 to 5 more minutes. Too scared to move or say anything, I just listened to the crying when suddenly the crying halted with a shrieking scream. Now, the only way I could explain the scream is kind of weird. It was loud enough for me to hear, but it seemed like anyone else could. What happened next is the chilling part. I have to explain the setup of my room a little bit. The TV and VCR stand was at the end of my bed with some space in between for walking. As I laid there, frozen by fear, I could only look straight forward with my eyes wide open. I was afraid to blink. All I could see was the 12 o'clock on my VCR blinking because I never set the time for it. Then, all of a sudden, a few seconds after I heard the scream, the 12 that I was looking at disappeared for what felt like hours but was probably about 5 minutes or so. The only thing that registered in my mind was either the VCR was broken or someone/something was standing in front of it. I couldn't see anything because it was pitch black in my room, but the 12 o'clock had disappeared. So scared, I shut my eyes and started praying. When I opened my eyes, there was the 12 o'clock blinking like normal. I had stayed up all night, too scared to sleep. When the sun came up, I found no evidence of anything being in my room or malfunctions of the VCR connections. After only living in that first floor apartment for about a month, my family decided to move to America. We were having a lot of money problems and wanted to come to the land of opportunity to see where it would take us. Not until we had moved out did my mom tell me that she hated that apartment and got bad feelings from it. I then proceeded to tell my mom what happened that night. She didn't act too shocked from it and proceeded to tell me that the only reason they got that apartment was because of the price. My parents knew that we were moving to America months prior and just needed a cheap place to stay for about a month. The apartment was dirt cheap because a girl that had lived way directly above us had committed suicide from the stress of getting into college. She had landed right by my bedroom window. I am now 29 years of age. I still cannot sleep without some type of light on. Usually it's a light source from my TV or computer. I know it's silly that a grown man still needs some type of nightlight, but the experience has never left me the same. I moved to an apartment complex in Daegu, South Korea. It seemed pretty old, but it was spacious and my parents really liked it. I was 16 at the time. One night, my dad turned on the karaoke machine in the living room and began to sing. To drown out the noise, I closed the door all the way and went to sleep, but I didn't lock it. Now, when opened slowly, my door makes a loud squeaking noise, but when opened fast, there is no noise. It took me a while to fall asleep because my dad was doing karaoke for a while, but I finally did. The door stayed closed during this whole time. In the middle of the night, the door began to squeak. I woke up and looked at the door. The door was opened a little, but the squeaking stopped. I was too tired to care, so I just went back to sleep. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the door began to squeak again. I thought maybe it was my sister trying to scare me, so I yelled out, "Hey, I'm tired. Go to sleep. Ah." But there was nothing. My sister usually freaks herself out before she can scare anyone. I was getting a little bit scared, but I was too lazy to get up and shut the door. I closed my eyes again, and once again, squeak. By this time, the door is opened just enough for a head to pop in. I finally got scared, so I got up, ran to the door, shut it, locked it, and turned the lights on. Afterwards, I got my cell phone and called the house. I thought it was a burglar. My mom picked up the phone and I told her that there's someone in the house, but she couldn't hear me and just hung up on me. I've never had any problems with my cell or the house phone. The weird thing is, I stayed up all night, listening for any noises this burglar may make, but I heard nothing. Morning came and I checked the house, but everything was the same, and nothing was missing. I was somewhat freaked out, but I honestly didn't think much of it. I was sort of skeptical. About a month later, my dad went to the States for a business trip, so it was my mom, my brother, and my sister in the house. We have 2 bathrooms, but the ones my siblings and I use does not have a tub. I usually wash my body at night and wash my hair in the morning. I'm the first one to wake up in the morning so I can wash my hair. Before I can continue, I have to explain the house layout. The bathroom with the tub is located in between my parents' bedroom and the computer room. The computer room is a dead end. The bathroom with a tub has a semi-clear sliding door. You can see somewhat clearly outside from the bathroom, but you can't see anything from outside in. The way I wash my hair, I put my head upside down so I can wash my hair with the hose and I can see the door from that position. While I was washing my hair, I saw a tall thing with a black robe slide slowly across the door towards the computer room. I knew my brother wasn't that tall, so I was curious of what it was. I waited for it to come back. Since the computer room is a dead end, I never took my eyes off the door. Once I was finished washing my hair, I opened the door and looked in the computer room, but there was nothing there. It couldn't have been my mom because she's shorter than me and I'm pretty short. Plus, I had to wake her up afterwards. My sister is even shorter than my mom and she was showering in the other bathroom. I also had to wake up my brother after I was done with my hair. Plus, like I said, my brother wasn't that tall. I never figured out what that thing was to this day. A couple of days later, I was too lazy to take a shower at night, so I had to take a shower and wash my hair in the bathroom with no tub in the morning. It was around 5:30 a.m., and I'd take a long time to get ready. While I was showering, I heard a man screaming. It was a faint yet close scream. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's one of those screams that sound like they're in a lot of pain. It went on the entire time that I showered. As soon as I finished, the scream stopped, and I immediately went to my mom, who was in the kitchen, which is right next to the bathroom, and asked her if there was some drunk guy outside screaming. She said no, and told me I was crazy and to eat breakfast. I have 2 small dogs that never bark. I have no idea what their deal is, but I've had one of them for 7 years and the other for 2 years, and they have never barked. They've whined when we ate, but that was it. I was home alone with my dad and the dogs. My dad was in the computer room doing work while I watched TV with the 2 dogs on either side of me. There was absolutely no noise, but the 2 dogs immediately got up together at the same time, ran to the door, and began barking ferociously at the door. They then ran back halfway, turned around, barked, ran towards it, barked, and just kept on doing that. My dad walked in and asked what was going on, and I told him I had no idea. He opened the door and nothing was there. We had to put the dogs in their rooms. After a while, I told my sister all these stories, and she told me she often saw that black figure walk right outside of her door. She leaves a crack open because she's afraid of the dark. I rode a taxi home one day, and I told the old taxi driver where I lived. They told me that my apartment complex is one of the oldest that there is in Daegu. There was also a suicide incident in one of the apartments back in the day. I didn't ask him about the details because I just didn't want to know. We moved to a different apartment complex about 2 years later. My parents never told us why. I used to be a cheerleader for a high school in an American school in South Korea. We usually went to one of our rival schools on a Friday, had a game on Friday afternoon, slept in their gym, then had another game the next morning on Saturday. This event occurred on one particular weekend. After the game, during the afternoon on Friday, we set up our bed area with our personal sleeping bags in the middle of the gym floor. The gym had multiple basketball hoops. The night soon fell and we were all sound asleep. I woke up because I heard someone dribbling a basketball across the court. I looked around and didn't see anything. I just figured that I was hearing things, so I went back to sleep. Then I heard another basketball being dribbled, so I woke up again. This time I looked around once more, and I saw a boy about the same age as me. They were holding a basketball and staring at me. I was startled by his cold, angry, yet sad look. I gasped, ruffled the sleeping bag, and blinked my eyes. I opened my eyes again, and the boy was no longer seen. The next morning, I met up with one of my friends from the rival school and shared this experience with her. She asked me to describe his physical appearance, and I did the best to my memory. She stared at me silently for about a minute, then told me about a boy who matched my description from the school that committed suicide 3 days ago. East or west, there's always a story that states that dogs can always see something that is invisible to our eyes. Among them, I would like to talk about a strange thing that happened to me 23 years ago. The location is Jeju Island, Western region. This is an anecdote I experienced in an area called Mosupo. At that time, for some reason, I lived at my maternal grandmother's house for a very short period of time. It was an area where there were almost no streetlights around my maternal grandmother's house. Because of that, I was a bit scared after 6 p.m. It was dark except for the faint lights in the distance and the lights of the house. There was a very cute Yorkshire Terrier living in my maternal grandmother's house. The reason I was able to stay in my scary maternal grandmother's house was that Yorkshire Terrier. But there was one problem with the terrier. It barked like crazy from 12 midnight all the way to 4 a.m. in the morning. However, every time the dog barked, my maternal grandmother would very calmingly bring something from the kitchen rather than scold the dog or lock it in another room. Here is a list of what my grandmother brought from the kitchen: sea salt, rice spirits, 5 grains, rice, barley, foxtail millet, bean, and proso millet. My grandmother sprinkled rice distilled alcohol, salt, 5 grains right in front of the direction the Yorkshire Terrier was barking. Then the dog stopped barking right away. She then would say, "I need to call a shaman." Morning came and my grandmother called the shaman. I was also curious about why Yorkshire Terriers barked at certain times. The shaman looked around the house with a very serious expression and said, "There's nothing wrong with the other rooms and the bathroom, but doesn't the dog always look in the same direction and bark?" Then my grandmother said that the dog always barks at the same time while looking in the same direction. The shaman spoke again, this time with a serious expression. To be honest, I would recommend leaving this house. I looked into all the other rooms and found that an amulet that averts evil powers was not working properly. The biggest problem of all, though, is the entrance room. There's a reason your dog always barks at the entrance room. That room is a hallway that ghosts pass. So far, there hasn't been any problems. However, I recommend you get out of this house. Then my maternal grandmother said, "Other than this house, I have no place to go out and live." The shaman thought about it for a while and then discussed several methods. Okay, then listen carefully to what I have to say. Always replace the amulet that averts evil with a new one each year. This is very important. Never sleep in the entrance room. As long as your dog is alive, it will warn of an evil spirit. The good thing is that this dog never barks for no reason. There are no people around here and not many wild animals. As usual, if your dog barks while looking at the entrance room, sprinkle him with alcohol and 5 grains and salt. And finally, the shaman said, "I told you about 5 things. Be absolutely careful. And this little friend is also a big being who protects this house in a way." I came to South Korea to be with my husband, who is in the army. I had been here for 5 months. I had been living in my apartment for over 4 months. About 2.5 months ago, I started getting the icy feeling like I was being watched. This went on with no happenings until last night. My husband is training in the field and I'm all alone in the house. Just like any other night, I got changed, went to bed, and called my husband. I got to sleep at around 12:30 a.m. I slept for about 2 hours when I started having a dream that I have had before. But instead of what normally happened in a dream, an unknown force was on my back with 2 handfuls of my hair holding me down. I woke up finding myself in the same position that I was in my dream. I blew it off, thinking it was my imagination. I fell back asleep a short time later. The dream resumed where it had left off. This happened more than 1 time, and I decided to just stay awake. It was about 5 a.m. in the morning now, but I wasn't exactly too sure. Suddenly, I heard a Korean man's voice talking. It was very deep. I could not make out any words that I knew. It sounded as if he was hissing the words. By this time, I was already terrified. I heard knocking and my chairs being scooted around. This went on for about an hour. Then it started scratching my walls. It started soft and short at first, but I ignored it until it got harder and louder, increasing each time. Finally, I could not take it anymore. It felt like my heart was about to burst. It was beating so hard. I got up and turned on all the lights in the house, and it stopped. I got dressed and looked around to find my chairs all moved. There were little things that moved, and then I saw the scratch marks on the wall. It was about 6:30 in the morning when I left. I am now looking for another apartment. There's no way that I'm going to stay there and let it keep getting worse and more violent. So this basically happened when I was in South Korea as an exchange student for a year. It's the only paranormal experience I had whilst I was there, but boy will I remember it for life. I decided to live alone while I was there instead of living with other people in a share house or in the university dorm. So I rented out a 1-room near the university and lived there on my own. One day, I fell asleep while watching an episode of Running Man. Suddenly, I woke up in the middle of the night. I wasn't sure about what time it was, but I was having these tingling feelings all over my body. It wasn't particularly cold as it was transitioning to autumn, but I just felt shivers all over my body and my hair was raised. Goosebumps was everywhere. That's when I heard loud breathing, and it wasn't my own. For a second, I was wondering to myself if I was dreaming and if I was aware I was dreaming, and if this was a lucid dream. I've had lucid dreams before and made myself fly or breathe underwater, but after a few seconds of trying to change the dream, it made me realize that I was definitely not dreaming. The breathing was coming from above me, where the ceiling was, and I couldn't bring myself to open my eyes. I pretended to be asleep, so I breathed slowly with a bit of volume, but I don't think I fooled whatever it was. The breathing became louder and closer, and I felt its hot breath, whatever it was. I could never forget this feeling, and it made me forget that I was supposed to be pretending that I'm asleep, but I inhaled sharply and just froze, too scared to move or make a single sound. It giggled, and it was a man's voice. And then I felt its breath shift to the back of my neck, and then after a bit, it shifted again, this time to my right arm. I started praying all my prayers because I was scared. Then I felt its breath on my right hand, and then the breath was concentrated onto my pinky finger. Then it bit me. It bit my pinky finger. I jerked my hand away and clambered into the covers because, of course, that's going to protect me. Stupid. After realizing I was being a fool, I got out of bed and ran to the light. I hit my hip along the way and bruised it, but after I turned on the light, there was nothing there. I don't know what I was expecting. I wasn't about to open the storeroom opposite my bed or check under the bed. I looked at my pinky finger and it didn't look particularly different, just a bit more pink compared to the rest of my fingers. No bite marks. But then again, I just jerked my hand away very quickly when it started to get painful. I brushed my teeth, grabbed my phone, and saw that it was 3:47 a.m., then put on a coat, grabbed my wallet, and left the house and went to a 24-hour karaoke. I was hoping that singing my favorite songs was going to distract me. I just didn't want to be in that room that night. I've told other people, but they just laugh it off and say that I must have been dreaming. But I was not.